Hey everyone,
Hey friends.
we're here a few minutes early just so you can log on and get ready and know that we're here this week.
Sidecar week.
Sidecar week, very excited about it.
Excited. First shaken cocktail, so make sure you have your
Get your
vessels.
shakers ready. Yeah. Throw your cocktail coupe in the freezer.
Yep, all the usuals.
And as you start tuning in and getting ready and your barware and your booze is all in place, drop a line in the comments.
Yeah.
Say, hey, you're here. Tell us where you're coming in from, what you're excited about, what kind of brandy or cognac you've got set aside to use today.
And if you don't have brandy or cognac, let us know. We have some easy like shifts that you can, easy pivots that you can do to create another Daisy cocktail, another cocktail in the family that you can get really excited about.
Great.
We'll be talking about that too.
Hi, Virgin. Nice to see you too. At some point, we'll have to get like little faces or icons on here.
I know.
So we can see what you all look like, all of our regulars. Just a few more minutes. We're going to give some folks a show up since we are starting a little early. And if you're starting a little early,
so are we.
Feel free to start a little early. We're going to make several cocktails, so this is not the official one. Stefan's just prepping it so that...
Well, I just feel like, if people arriving at our party, there should be a cocktail waiting for you.
That's right.
Do we have the specs in the chat? Does everybody know what they're making?
We'll drop it in there once we officially...
Start. Okay, gotcha.
Start. Who else is here? Who's excited about the sidecar? I am.
I'm excited.
As excited as I can be. Hi, Maria.
Having fun.
Maria from Illinois is here.
Hey, Maria. Welcome to the bar.
Where's North Barrington? I don't know Illinois very well.
I could hardly say the name of that town without an accent. North Barrington.
What accent is that?
I don't know. North Barrington, obviously. Are we close, Maria? Is that close to the accent?
All right. Diane's here again from Columbus, Ohio. Woohoo! Hey, John. I had the pleasure of speaking with John from Pittsburgh way before when the cocktail journey was still a little idea in our head.
Oh, he goes way back.
Yes, and so he's offered some great perspectives, and we also chatted about Pittsburgh, because I actually went to school there for 2 years.
Oh, did you?
I did. University of Pittsburgh, UPitt.
It sounds officially Pittsburghy.
It does, doesn't it? Maria says that North Barrington is an hour northwest of Chicago.
Nice.
If you've heard of the Woodfield Mall, 20 minutes from there.
Nice. I love Chicago.
All
I
right.
haven't spent any time in the suburbs, though. I need to next time.
We are officially here at 4:30, so those of you who are joining us here on time,
welcome.
We're here with a cocktail already made.
Yeah, welcome to the bar.
Give you a delicious, tasty idea of what we're doing today. To those of you who were here on time last week, we apologize and are glad that we're back and we figured out some of that work. So, all right, we are gathering the rest of our bar tools and you should do the same. Today we're covering the sidecar.
Sidecar week.
Beautiful cocktail. I was chatting with Sean about it beforehand because I remember, I think the first time that he made a sidecar back when we were in our old house, and he said, "Why have I not had this before?" It was one of those cocktails that is so classic, and it's also like so simple, and it's such a great representation of a model of a cocktail that then can be used and grown from there. And we just had it so late in our cocktail journey that it was surprising that we hadn't had it before. Right. So it's delicious, and that's our little story about the sidecar.
The sidecar is a seminal cocktail in the cocktail compendium because it really showed up as kind of the precursor to the modern day sour. So yeah, it's always got a big place in my heart because it's the first of its kind, and it's like the older brother to one of everybody's favorite cocktails, the Margarita. And really quickly gets lost in the shuffle because if you're offered this cocktail or a Margarita, more of the times than not, you're gonna have a Margarita. But it's really important if you think of it, and we're gonna go well more into it when people start to arrive. But it's an important cocktail in everybody's cocktail journey because I think this is the first time people really experience brandy or cognac with citrus, and that's a really cool sensation for sure.
Yeah, well, if you haven't already, let us know who you are so we know who's in our audience. And if you've got your brandy or your cognac, what are you planning on using tonight? That's always an interesting thing to know. Stefan is using Remy Martin.
Yeah, 1738. The Accord Royale. This was a bottle left behind by one of my best friends. It was on a couple weeks ago when we were doing the martini, Karen Grill. So they flew me out to New York twice. She beat me in a national competition twice with Remy Martin 2 years in a row. So I like it second best. I'm joking. I don't have a better cognac. I love it. That Mason Frand, those are my two favorites. But
I got an email from one of you beforehand. Hi, John. Thanks for the email. And he said, I didn't make it to the store to get brandy, or I don't have cognac. I'm all out. It must be popular at your house.
Is he here?
So I don't know. John, are you in the audience? Let us know. Because the other thing that you can do, he hasn't said hi. No. Hey, Jamie. Hi, Carissa. Nice to see you.
Hey, friends.
If you don't have brandy or cognac on hand, it's totally okay. What Stefan is going to talk about and what we're going to chat about too is how the Sidecar is really the first kind of the daisy cocktail. It's the root of the daisy family, which is the first kind of sour that was created after Prohibition. And so if you don't have your brandy or cognac, grab some gin, grab some tequila, because the recipe specs for this daisy are very, very well transferable to a whole host of other kinds of delicious daisies, like the gin daisy or the tequila daisy. So you can think about that too in terms of if you're going to have more than one cocktail tonight, maybe you make the first one traditional Sidecar, and then you break out your botanist.
Oh, John is here. Did you just hear that? If you don't have cognac lying around, you're in luck because this is the daisy cocktail, and it can be easily transferred to pretty much any base spirit. Mm-hmm. So you kind of get to choose your own adventure. If you're interested in gin tonight, the gin daisy is really delicious, same spec. Or if you're like us and we're here in Southern California, the daisy that we tend to make more than anything else is the Margarita, which is Spanish word for daisy, and is the daisy cocktail of Mexico. There's a couple different ways to make the Margarita now in modern times, but the original daisy was the Sidecar spec. So I just recommend daisy it up. There it is.
There it is.
John, I absolutely love Pierre Ferrand 1840 cognac. It's really delicious. And it is paired beautifully with that dry curacao, and you're doing the right thing, adding a little rich simple, because that dry curacao is exactly what the name says. It's way drier. This is already a really dry drink, so those that like a little bit more sugar, feel free to add a little bit of extra sugar to your cocktail. It won't mess up the cocktail at all. Even if you're using a traditional triple sec such as cognac or combier, it still can be a little on the dry side. That's kind of why the garnish is this heavy crust of sugar on this glass, and could be on yours if you like to do that. It's one way to combat kind of the dryness.
Yep. So we've already made the first Sidecar.
Yes.
And we did that in advance so that you could see this beautiful cocktail, which is not quite totally in focus, but isn't that gorgeous?
Ooh. Should we make another now that everybody's here? That we can all make it together?
Now that you're here, we'll make one together.
Cool. Let's do it. I'm going to organize.
And that can be Stefan's, and you can make the other one for Sean. And so break out your
I like
brandy or your cognac or your spirit of choice, your orange liqueur. I think we highly recommend either Cointreau or Combier, as Stefan just mentioned, also known as triple sec. These words are very interchangeably used often. Yep. So
you can use the dry curacao from Pierre Ferrand as well. It's a totally different product. Generally, it's better suited for more like other cocktails that have a heavy amount of citrus, but you're trying to add that orange flavor in, or sorry, a heavier amount of sugar, such as a tiki drink or something more tropical. and then you would want that orange liqueur to actually have less sugar, less Brix level. But you can absolutely use that, and you can absolutely add a little extra sugar, like who was that? Was that
John? I think it was John in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, John Schmid.
Did. So you can look in these chats and kind of take a look at that. Anyways, this is our first shaken cocktail. So it might be good to just kind of go over using a Boston style setup like this. Boston shaker means these two pieces here interlock together. This one sits really low in the larger piece. Most of them don't. Most of them sit a bit higher, which tends to be a little easier for non-professionals, people who haven't just learned how to. If this guy's here, it's way easier to tip this over, and you've just made a whole cocktail and knocked it over, and it's wasted. It's really ruined your 20 minutes because now you're behind making cocktails. So yeah, we'll start with
shed a little tear too.
Yeah, totally. I just built this whole round of 10 cocktails, and I just knocked them all down because I'm a klutz. And everybody's looking at me going, "Why? Where's my cocktail?" And there's 3 people behind that. Anyways, now we're getting into nightmares of being a professional bartender. Anyways.
If you're a home bartender, you're like, no, that Cointreau is expensive.
Right, or Remy especially. So we're going to build this cocktail the way I always build my cocktails, but I use the least expensive ingredient first. That way, if you make a mistake, it's not a really sad thing. So generally, the base spirit will be last. So when you read cocktail recipes, usually the spirit is the first thing you see. Right? So I'll usually build backwards. So I know we just sent some specs out, which has brandy or cognac, Cointreau, and then lemon. We're actually going to do that in reverse order, just in case we make a mistake. It's not as sad. So we're going to start off with 3/4 of an ounce, or 25 milliliters of fresh lemon juice, and then we'll do the same 3/4, 22.5 milliliters of Cointreau, if you want to be specific. So equal parts of that. That's the sweet in the sour. It's obviously not as sweet as like a sugar syrup, but it's pretty close. It's about 33%. And then we have our base spirit, which we're going to use this beautiful cognac from France, but you can use an American or French brandy as well. So that was half. That was 3/4. We need to do 1.5 ounces. There we go. 45 mils. So we're using this. You can use, like we talked about, any base spirit will work in a daisy. Traditionally Sidecar, cognac, or brandy is the play. We're using really fancy cognac, which comes from the Champagne region of France. You can use blended brandy, whatever you'd like. One of the keys to this cocktail and why it is a dry cocktail but isn't super dry is because most cognacs they actually do add a little bit of caramel for color, but it does enhance the sugar level of the product, right? As opposed to a super dry whiskey that hasn't seen any added sugar after the malt stage. So it does change mostly just the mouthfeel. It's still a really dry cocktail, but it'll have a little thicker mouthfeel from that dosaging. So that's that. So now we have all that in the tin. We're gonna add our ice, and then I'll show you how to lock it in so it doesn't fall out on you.
Matthew says, "I'm using Grand Marnier, no regrets."
Oh yeah, now that's just fancy as all heck. So Grand Marnier is a great substitute. That's another orangish ingredient, but it's less of a liqueur and more of a hybrid between a spirit and a liqueur. There's way less sugar content, and I think that's cognac based, so very fancy. Cool. So to lock this tin, we're actually just going to use the other side here. You don't want to do this dead on. If you do this dead on, it's going to be really hard. It's not going to create a great seal until it's really cold, and after that, it's going to be very hard for you to get it out. You actually want to keep it at like about a 45-degree angle. I don't know if you can kind of see. There we go. You can kind of see that. So that's kind of like a 45-degree angle. You have to kind of pardon us because the smaller tin is a bit smaller, so it's hard to see. And then you just want to give it like a little push. Some people you see, like bartenders, tap this really hard. You can do that too. It's just kind of louder. And then, so there you go. You've kind of got this. This is relatively sealed. As it chills, it's going to seal better as the metal actually contracts. So then you just want to hold with both hands, one on each. I usually hold one on each side of the tin, so you're kind of watching that top tin so it doesn't fall out on you. Also, a little thing we do in the bartending world, you'll see bartenders will actually turn away from you, because generally, if you've got this thing, it's either going to pop out this way or it's going to pop out this way. So if you turn this way, I'm only going to get Rachel wet. I'm not going to get any of my guests wet, so that's kind of what I do. And you just shake nice and hard. You do it like this. Add a little flair in there. You can go one-handed. This can hurt one arm more than the other, so you got to be careful with that. You know. You want to make sure you're breathing, your core is engaged, so you're not hurting yourself. And then to break the seal, now that we have this, right, the smaller one is pointing towards me. So you want to choose either side here and just give it a little knock, and that'll knock that thing nice and easy. That's where this comes into play. If it's right down the center, it's a little harder to get that thing to unlock. So just be careful there. That's kind of how we do that.
And thanks for dropping your questions in. That's going to be great for our Q&A, and we'll definitely get to all those. I'm taking a note.
Yeah, this one's kind of a bit more complex in the building stage because there's some new components we haven't talked about. The rim, you can do a couple things. You can just have some lemon juice in a little cup. You can kind of turn it. I usually like to just use either the piece of the lemon after you've juiced it instead of throwing it away. You can kind of use that. And you just kind of rub it against the side of the glass. Kind of like that, and that'll give you just want to do the outside. That's generally what I do. I just use the outside of it, and then I'll just kind of roll it like this. If you just put it down in the center like that guy, you're actually going to get a bunch of sugar inside the glass, which is, you're going to end up chewing it, which is fun. Some people like to chew their sugar. I'm not judging. But I like a really clean, like elegant cocktail, and that's how you do that. And then we're going to go ahead and fine strain this drink. Just make sure we get all the ice chips out. So we've got the Hawthorne strainer in the tin. I kind of push it a little bit towards the tin a little bit. That way you kind of created a nice little gate. And then I take a tea strainer like this and just pour right through. If you don't have the tea strainer, just kind of close off the gate a little bit more to try to get as much of that ice to stay in the shaker. That way you have a really nice clean cocktail that doesn't have a bunch of ice chips in it, so it's not going to over dilute any further than we just shook. And you've got this really delicious sidecar. And I'll usually garnish with an orange peel, which I lost the peeler. There it is. Once again, expressing all that orange oil into the drink to kind of accentuate the triple sec, the orange liqueur in the drink. So you got those oils in there. We have these beautiful cocktail picks, so I'm kind of picking this off to make it look really pretty, but you can just throw this right in the drink. Just keep in mind that the orange oils will actually break the surface tension of the like the fine bubbles, that the aeration that form. So that's one of the things, the reason why I like to pick this off. You get a little bit less of that kind of all the beautiful aeration will like push to one side of the drink. But if you notice, I don't know if you can kind of see. Oh, there you go. You can see how the bubbles are all over the drink, whereas sometimes they all end up on one side. It might happen to you, so you can see that. It's not bad. It's just something that happens. I'll observe things.
Isn't that beautiful? That's for Sean.
So that's the sidecar. So the sidecar was born in Prohibition, which started in 1920, which was this really noble experiment that failed miserably in the States, obviously, where we got rid of like the legal alcohol sales, except for the rich, for those that wanted to break the law, or anybody who had an ailment that whiskey would fix, which we all know is not true. But there was a lot of prescriptions being prescribed. That was for sure. So that's kind of where this drink originated. But it actually came out of a drink that originated in the 1800s called the Brandy Crusta, which is a very old-timey attempt at a sour cocktail. It really was a stirred cocktail with just a hint of citrus. Citrus, before modern refrigeration, was obviously hard to get in a lot of parts of the country and worldwide, right? It wouldn't last very long. It would turn and you wouldn't have a whole lot. So usually, if you see citrus in any way, you should usually see it in a liqueur at that era, because it's something that's way more stable, right? That's where the orange comes in, like orange liqueur. It was a way to get kind of citrus flavor into a cocktail without using fresh citrus that was going to go bad on you. The same reason why, like, most pineapple in cocktails before the modern era was a pineapple gum syrup that would last a really long time, because pineapples wouldn't before modern refrigeration. So the Brandy Crusta is a drink in this family that actually started this family, which would only pretty much have a bar spoon of citrus, a bar spoon of lemon juice. It was really boozy and kind of weirdly acidic on the back end. But the drink looked spectacular. It was served up with a heavy crust of sugar all the way down to the stem, and this really beautiful. You basically peel the whole lemon peel off in like a series of rings, then upside down place them in the drink so they would spiral inwards. So it looked really spectacular. And I still love that preparation, but the drink is terrible. It's almost undrinkable to a modern palate. There's a few small little wins.
Is that because it had such small citrus?
Yeah, it's just
sugar?
really boozy, and there's not enough sugar to balance that off. And there's no added element. There's this weird. It's like if you've ever cleaned your coffee machine with orange oil, like that smell. Like that's what reminds me of Brandy Crusta. It just isn't a satisfying sensation. Yet the Sidecar is. So if you want to take a small win from Prohibition, we got what ended up being the modern sour. So there's some good there. I mean, obviously the Sidecar didn't taste as good when they started running out of quality French brandy and French cognac, and then they started using whatever they decided brandy was, being made in somebody's. That one flies back. He lives for Thursdays. Yeah. They started using whatever they could find, which was not as good. The gin was terrible at the time, right? Bathtub gin. So it was just not a very good cocktail. And as Prohibition went on, we lost things. Well, you would see less of sidecars, and you'd see more of like what we consider as modern day sours, which is like spirit and heavy amount of citrus, heavy amount of sugar, because you're trying to mask, what is it ostensibly way worse made spirits. As Prohibition went on, and it was harder and harder to find quality modifiers such as orange liqueurs and whatnot, and it became really hard to find a base spirit that wasn't like turpentine.
So we went from the Brandy Crusta to adding this beautiful sort of fresh citrus element,
right,
to then not having that French brandy being available. To
right.
The Sidecar kind of waned in terms of
I mean by the end of
popularity.
Prohibition, I think the Sidecar had already kind of waned, and I don't think it really came back until the early 2000s. I mean, it was there, people understood it, but generally, if you were going to get a Sidecar in the 70s, 80s, the mid-century, you were going to get something with like some stabilized like sweet sour mix, which is, I mean, say what you will about the Crusta. I think that this recipe with a store-bought sweet and sour mix is even worse. So don't recommend. Highly don't recommend. We have some questions though.
Yeah, we actually had a couple of questions. Cool. One earlier from, I'm going to scroll up
Jeff,
to see.
My drink.
From Eric, and then Jamie also is asking sort of the same question. Can we talk a little bit about the different Sidecar specs? Because, like Jamie just said, I've never seen a cocktail with so many different ratios listed. And Eric also asked specifically about a brandy heavy version with like 2 ounces of booze.
Yeah.
And so, what do you think contributes to that, and why did we land on this?
So this was the
spec.
Okay, well this is the original. I mean, nobody was there, so we won't ever know for sure. But this, in like my bartender's brain, and the way I know cocktails have evolved, and they've evolved heavily depending on the tastes, like the taste of the day. This is about as close as you're probably going to get to the original spec of the Sidecar. It just makes perfect sense if you understand the Crusta and what its failures were. That a traditional Daisy would have been 1.5, 3/4, 3/4. But in saying that, I'm sure there was plenty of people, even at the time, that liked a little bit more sugar in their drinks. So you might see a bar spoon, 1/4 ounce of sugar being added. But this was pretty much how... I think this is pretty much as close to historically accurate as possible. At the time, people were drinking way less sugar. They were eating way less sugar, way less processed foods. You really don't see processed foods and heavy sugar being used in America until World War II, when things became really scarce, and you'd see a lot of TV dinners and whatever what we now attribute to like that mid-century TV dinner, where things were heavily processed and more sugar was added to kind of mask things, right? Some inefficiencies in food preparations and what have you, and trying to stretch resources. At the time, we were used to drinking, Americans, not me, obviously, we're not around. We were used to drinking, lots of really bitter things. I'm used to eating like really bitter things. Green chartreuse was really popular. A lot of those style of like herbal liqueurs were super popular in original cocktail communities and cocktail fashion. So we were just normally used to drier cocktails at the time. Nowadays, I think with a more traditional sour and just in general, people drink a lot more sugar. If you think of Coca-Cola and all these, anything that's got high fructose corn syrup really comes to mind here. Our palates have changed, for better or for worse. And we now expect and we anticipate our brains, our taste buds anticipate more sugar than I think somebody 100 years ago would. So yeah, I think that a modern day spec, if you would order a sidecar at a bar, if it wasn't in like, Manhattan or Chicago or maybe a couple bars on the West Coast, you're more than likely going to get an altered, in a good way, probably a more modern Daisy spec, which has a little bit more sugar added and possibly more booze as well.
Yeah. So we've been having a discussion in the chat about like this is a perfect opportunity to explore your preferences. John also acknowledged that this is also a pretty forgiving recipe in terms of the exact. It doesn't have to be exactly.
Well, once you get into citrus, and especially when that magical 3/4 to an ounce of citrus, you have a lot more leeway. It's kind of like, I think people who've actually shot like rolls of film, like as opposed to like digital, mediums for cameras. Like film is just a more stable, thing for ISO and like being able to run the gamut on exposure. I feel like sours kind of translate in the same way, that you get a little bit more leeway, especially once you start adding some sugar in. You might have something slightly more sweet or more dry, but you can still drink it. Whereas if you mess up some specs on like an old fashioned or something like that, it can either taste really boozy or really watered down super quick. Sours have a little bit more leeway, and that allows us to kind of tailor them to our own flavor, our own tastes. If we like a little bit more sugar, it might not be because we have a sweet tooth. It's that we like that viscosity that happens when you add a little bit more sugar to a sour. And that's why I try to shy away from sweet and like not sweet to like dry, or this one's a little bit fatter. I use the word fat or thin a lot because I feel like that's a better interpretation of a sour. That like, oh, this has like a lot of fat, like it's thick, as opposed to like it's really sweet, Like if you put too much sugar in an old fashioned, it's too sweet. But if you put a little bit more sugar than what we do with this spec in a sidecar, it's just got a different mouthfeel, but it's still really delicious.
And one of the things, just like side comment too, that I learned along my journey is that I don't like sweet cocktails, but the answer isn't necessarily to add less sugar, because then it can be out of balance with the citrus or the bitter in the cocktail.
You can
so the solution sometimes is just having less of both the citrus and the sugar in it, and having a heavier sort of boozier cocktail.
Yeah, you could
which
do
is
that,
a little bit
and
drier.
that's something that you see a lot with margaritas. That you'll see the sugar and the citrus just bump down, and then you just get more booze. That's one way to make a margarita. The other thing is like when you when you actually juice your citrus. We juice this right before we hit the go button on the hit live to start this live feed. If you juice it a couple hours before, it's a little less acidic. You actually pick up a little bit more of the nuance of the citrus. I don't recommend letting it sit more than 8 to 10 hours. Certainly not more than 24. I think at that point, the diminishing returns on citrus is really bad. And it tastes really bitter and just not very good. There's really little citric acid, really brightness in there. So yeah, citrus has this really unique curve of like freshness.
Sorry to jump in. Doesn't the oxidation start within 15 minutes?
It does. Yeah, and some of that oxidation's good in all honesty. Especially when you're talking about lime juice. Freshly squeezed lime juice is super acidic. And you don't pick up any other flavor on your tongue other than just, whoa, that's poppy. I get that pop of citrus. So yeah, most of the time if you've gone to a cocktail bar, modern cocktail bar, they're not juicing to order anymore, right? They were doing that like 10, 15 years ago, but there's just so many cocktail bars and they're so much busier that they can't keep up with that. But also I feel like the way that we taste our cocktails have evolved. Once again, they just continuously change over time, and they're evolving again in this year of this pandemic. That we're starting to drink, hopefully more classic cocktails, but we're changing the way we drink, right? We're not even drinking in bars right now. So yeah, that's something to keep in mind too. So if you've tasted this spec and you're like, wow, this is a little citrusy, think about when you juiced your citrus. It could have been right before that, and maybe it was a little citrusy.
I want to call out too that one of the things John from Pittsburgh says is the only way to really screw up your sour is for it to be either too sweet or too sour for your taste, or to use a commercial sour mix, which, you know, we're not snobs about too many things on the cocktail journey, but one thing that we are always going to say is please use fresh citrus.
Yeah, especially when you're looking at historical recipes like this that don't call for sweet and sour. You know, I think you can make a case for a few drinks that maybe don't have fresh citrus. Like I know that like Jeffrey Morgenthaler's gin gimlet's freaking incredible, and he makes a lime cordial out of fresh lime peels, a little bit of fresh juice, I think, and some citric acid and what have you. But I mean, I've had that, and that's super delicious. Probably better than what is ostensibly, a gin lime sour. But
it's probably just a better, nicer version of Rose's lime juice.
Totally,
I mean,
that was the point. I mean,
he's
been bartending longer than I have, so like he absolutely was working in bars that had multiple bottles of Rose's lime juice. So did I. So yeah, like trying to think interpreting what that might have been in a more like craft way. But, yeah, so that's something I say, and more along the aspects of like think about what you're putting in your body. That's like some heavy, processed food right there, and like it's just not very good for you. Especially when there's an easy alternative, modern. You can go down to any grocery store and get fresh citrus. And it's really easy to do.
And we're so fortunate these days that even in places like Ohio that don't have citrus trees, in your backyard, unlike we do, we just live in a place where citrus is available all year round now. And it might be a little bit more expensive in other areas of the country, but when you think about using this brandy.
Yeah. I mean, you're probably not, I mean, it makes no sense to use $80 cognac with the Mrs. T.
The same conversation around ice, right? It's using high quality ice because you're using high quality spirits. Now, I think there's always a place for you're going camping and you're on your way out to the sticks and you're like, I don't have any. I'll just stop here and get some. You're still gonna enjoy that retro style cocktail because it's a fun experience, but. Trying with the fresh. If you haven't ever used fresh citrus in your cocktails,
amaretto sour is awful with fresh lemon juice. So.
But just to say, like, if you've never used fresh citrus in your cocktails and you use bottled stuff, there's no shame in it. But now you know that it's we highly recommend like using the fresh juice. We promise it's going to be worth it.
John, Rose's lime absolutely comes in handy. Like I said, the gin gimlet's freaking delicious. So that's some basics on the Sidecar and where it came from the Brandy Crusta. And if you haven't seen what that looks like, I highly recommend just like Googling image, like what does a Brandy Crusta look like? It's one of the most beautiful, like classic cocktails you'll ever see.
Let's talk about. Carl says that he uses Saint Louis. What is that?
Louis Trey. Yep.
How many of that with Mr. and
13.
Mrs. with sweet and sour mix? He said, "Is it wrong?" I think it's very important to say
no, it's not
wrong.
If you have the cash to drop on some Louis Trey, you can absolutely drink it however you want.
That's right.
Like I don't tell people how if they should be parking the Ferrari, right in or backing in, however you want to park that Ferrari, man. Like we're all gonna stay far away from you because we can't pay that bill if we break it.
But like depending on,
Later, Maria. We'll see you next time.
Bye, Maria. I don't think we've used sweet and sour mix at home, and I don't know that we ever have. I don't think we ever have. But you guys, I'm not a snob. I'm going to go over to my friend's house, and they're making margaritas, and they're blending them with sweet and sour mix. I'm going to enjoy that margarita. I'm going to have fun with my friends.
Carl, I do love that idea of the juxtaposition of like something ludicrous like that. I have literally... I've literally worked a guest shift where we did we did a daiquiri with 24-year Appleton. Like, you probably shouldn't make a daiquiri with 24-year Appleton and then cover the whole glass and the tray we served it on in edible 24-karat gold, but we did, right? Like, it's just, sometimes you do that stuff just to be ridiculous. So, and I think that we lose sight of that, especially this year, right, where everything's been super serious and like, I look back on that time like, I was able to be out and like do this rad shift and Palm Springs, and I did something stupid like that. Like, I wish I had that time back. But it was just fun to do it at the time, right? So, like, who cares? Like, I don't recommend making, like, if you're really trying to hit like a historical accuracy on a cocktail or really like at least experience it in its truest sense. I highly recommend trying it once in its classic way, and then after that, do it however you like.
So Carl was being facetious. He uses his
I
own
know.
organic lemons from his garden. Although I'm curious because I think John Park and then now Carl also are using Meyer lemons juice in their cocktails.
I mean, it's citrus season here in the southern half of the states. Whether that be Florida or here in California, the citrus that we're getting right now is just stupid. So yeah,
That's
Meyer's
great.
lemons are in season. Kalmatsi, if you're around anything like that makes it really tasty.
I'm curious to know, you guys. I find the at least for me in my palate, the Meyer lemon and traditional, I don't know what we even call this, regular lemon, are very different, especially not necessarily in terms of taste, but like on the nose, in terms of like the aromatics that they add to the cocktail.
Yeah.
And that would be an interesting thing to explore if you've got a Meyer lemon tree, or if you have never used Meyer lemon in your cocktail. I think it adds this like really floral note to citrus cocktails. So curious if anyone of you have observed that or have used other citrus. Cheeto encrusted Wagyu beef.
Carl, I'm sorry, I did see your question earlier.
We're gonna get back to this.
On clarifying
Here we go.
juice, which is rad. I absolutely love that. If you've never done it, I highly recommend trying it.
What is clarifying juice for those of us who
Sure. You're
have never done it?
So I mean, there's a lot of pectin that's why lemon juice, lime juice is really cloudy. There's a lot of pectin floating around in here. Just it's naturally found in the juice, and it's not a bad thing. Actually, it gives it this really beautiful mouthfeel in cocktails and whatever, right? It like adds to the viscosity of the drink, and when as long as you're along the way you're filtering out all the pulp and all that stuff, it's still going to be a really delicious cocktail. Clarification, basically, you usually use some sort of agents that will kind of start breaking away the bonds of the pectin with the juice enough so that you can either spin in a whatchamacallit? Centrifuge, yeah, to spin off all those pectins, so you have this really clear, acidic, limey, clear liquid, which is super great, and I think there's a lot of applications for it. First off, it's way more shelf stable. You actually don't even really need to refrigerate it, because what is really going to start breaking down first are those pectins. Will start going bad. And then it's really fun to play with to acidify like stirred cocktails. When you get into something like the Sidecar, if you have the ability to clarify, I highly recommend trying it and see if you like the clarified version better than the traditional just juiced, pectin infused, juice. Because you might like it better. It's going to be a way cleaner mouthfeel, but at the same time, it doesn't. One of the reasons why we shake a sour as opposed to stir it is this idea of aeration and adding these really tight, fine bubbles to your cocktail that change the way it plays on your palate. It's way more fluffy, and there's a lot of air in there, so it gives you this really different sensation than you would if you're drinking a stirred cocktail. A lot of that does get lost if you have a clarified juice. It tastes heavier on your tongue. So that'd be fun if you have that ability to do it, to try it both ways. But generally, the biggest highlights of having a clarified juice is that it's super stable in comparison to something that only lasts about 12 to 24 hours. You'll get a lot longer life out of your juice. So you can like pre-batch, a set, like a whole bottle worth of cocktail. Sidecar would have you leave it in your fridge and then just pour and shake and enjoy it for a lot longer period of time.
How much longer would you say?
I mean, you're good pretty much indefinitely. I mean, I guess over time there's obviously you're going to start losing acid, but you can also add acid back in. You can buy, citric and malic acid and stuff. Yeah, you can start getting really nerdy. I've never let clarified juice sit long enough for it to really go bad. In bars, we tend to run through it pretty quick. But yeah, that's a way to do it. We're definitely in the molecular technology now, which is really cool. But if you want more information on that, maybe we ask. I can ask a buddy to let me bring in a Spinzall sometime. We can have some fun.
That would be really fun. Let's see. John says he agrees Meyer's pretty floral, and so hybrids are nice. So you can do half and half sometimes.
Yeah, usually if I'm using Meyer lemon in a cocktail, it's not to acidify; it's to add an added, flavor component or aromatic component. Acid phosphate, John, I would love to get back on that sometime. Probably not in the Sidecar chat, but I absolutely love acid phosphate. It's an acid from non-toxic metals, traditionally used in soda fountains. Great to acidify soda drinks because it isn't a citric acid. It won't negatively interact with carbon dioxide and kind of expand in a way that, like, if you put fresh citrus and sugar on top of soda water, it just does this. Or champagne, right? If you're making a mimosa, that just explodes on you. So it was a technique to acidify sodas. And they're actually acid phosphate is still found in most modern sodas like Coca-Cola and what have you as one of the main acid components. But yeah, it's a lot of fun to use in cocktails. A lot of bartenders during Prohibition left the bar, obviously, and started working at soda fountains and found that ingredient and ended up some of them brought it back to the bar afterwards. So that's a really cool product.
We had a question from your earlier side comment about the amaretto sour.
Yeah.
What would you use besides fresh lemon juice then?
Sweet and sour mix. That's how it's supposed to be, right? Like, if you're gonna do that, just get slutty.
Wow.
I mean, go ahead and use fresh lemon, but you have to use. It's like ends up being. You have to really change the ratio. It's usually like an ounce and a half to 2 ounces of amaretto, 3/4 ounce of lemon juice, and maybe a bar spoon of simple, because amaretto is already so sweet.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Confession: I've never had an amaretto sour.
It's okay. It's all right. Yeah, it's not something. I mean, it's. I guess it's something. If you like cocktails,
not on our list.
It's not on the list. It's not on the classic cocktail list. None of the cocktails from the 70s are going to be. But hey, just have fun with it.
What other questions do you have? Drop them in the chat. Tell us how you liked your sidecar, and if you're making round 2, what are you doing to switch it up? Are you going to try a different ratio? Are you going to swap out a spirit?
Yeah, we still have some tequila, right? We should we should do it. I think just because we're here, I mean, we'll obviously probably cover the Margarita again sometime, but
we'll have our whole own live stream just.
But I just kind of want
But let's do it.
I'll tell you what, like living here in California, I tend to, when I make margaritas, I tend to make them Tommy's style, which doesn't have orange liqueur. It's actually just tequila, lime, and some sort of sugar, generally agave syrup or rich simple syrup. What was that?
It's down there.
Yeah, Dahlia. Yeah, we'll give it a go. I want to try it anyway.
Agave syrup too.
Oh, you do? Cool. I don't. Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
All right, cool. Let's just make one, and then we can kind of go over these techniques. And while we're talking about it, yuzu juice is fantastic. It is more of an orange style citrus than a lemon, so you would want to probably acidify it with some sort of combination of both citric and malic. Carl, you're on the right track. Darcy O'Neill for the win for sure. That book is incredible. If you guys haven't read Fix the Pumps, highly recommend it. It's a really short read too. I've read it on the flight to New Orleans before.
Carrie, thanks for the typo call out.
We have a typo now?
In the written recipe online, it says to shake to child.
Oh, shake to child?
Which should be shake to chill.
Yeah.
To appropriately chill and dilute. Oh, that's hilarious. Shake to child.
Since last week we did the Sazerac, which is a New Orleans based cocktail. We should just mention that the Crusta originated in New Orleans, Louisiana. Every cocktail originated in New Orleans. Almost every cocktail. Anybody know that? You can pretty much trace almost every modern classic to a New Orleans cocktail.
Well, do you think that they were drinking there more, and there were more bartenders in that part of the country?
There was definitely. I mean, it is today what it was back then, right? It's like the Vegas of the South. It's like that in Nashville. There's a heavy drinking culture there, and a really classy one too, because there was just so many different like cultures that just kind of right together, right? Armagnac or cognac, that's up to you. They're very similar. Slightly different regions, slightly different grapes, in a slightly different distillation process. One using mostly pot still, and one using more column stills. So that's the answer on that one. Saw that.
Boom.
I love these conversations. One of the things about specific to my cocktail experience is that I actually haven't had a lot of experience with brandy and cognacs and cocktails. It's just not a spirit category that we really got into, Sean and I, at our bar. And so I'm really looking forward to, well, I love the Sidecar, and we at least have had that experience. But I'm looking at getting into, and this is something that we're going to start a series on for those who are members of the Cocktail Journey at our sort of growth level, is sort of Spirits 101 and a deep dive into each of the different spirits categories and exploring all these nuances. You know, what's the difference between a cognac and an armagnac and a brandy, and then all the derivatives of brandy, like anything else that falls into the brandy category. And we'll get into that, which is really fun. So,
Sorry.
that's okay.
Little ASMR for you.
It's the best part of the show, I
Yep.
swear. I miss that so much, being out.
Same.
In San Diego, actually, you can go back to the bars now with, you know, plenty of safety precautions and that sort of thing. But when you have young
Still
children
not
at
ready
home, it's
to-
still...
Still not ready to sit at a bar.
Yeah.
Scary.
And there are a lot of you who probably aren't either. And I think that cocktails at home have always been a staple for us, and they're here to stay for sure.
For sure.
So, yeah, John, also that comment is, you know, you can make lots of cocktails with a $50 bottle of booze that would in total cost you a significant amount more if you were buying those out of the bar.
Yeah, but most cocktails, especially cocktails with citrus, using really, really high-end spirits aren't necessarily going to help you get a better cocktail.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Let's talk about that for a second, because it's something that, when we started out with cocktails, we were buying the cheapest booze because we were, you know, in our 20s and poor. And
there's something to say about that, right? Like sours. That's kind of where sours originated, was with cheap booze.
Mm-hmm.
So
How do you
yeah.
make cheap booze taste better?
Right, yeah. So there's like a, you know, some diminishing returns there, I feel like, if you're, you know, making a gin sour with Monkey 46 or whatever, you know, like, it's going to make a great gin sour, but it's a little overkill. And, you know, it's something to keep in mind with, you know, when we were talking about old fashions and stirred cocktails, is that you're less worried about a really high-end premium whiskey in that cocktail, and you're more worried about just making sure that the dilution is right. So making sure you have a whiskey that's in and around the 95 to 100 proof is kind of like that sweet spot for stirred cocktails. So that's more what you want to keep in mind. Less of like, I want the $100, $200 bottle of cognac. You know, this honestly is a little overkill, but you know, like,
He's such a fan, he had to use it.
yeah, you know, that's my second favorite cognac, and you know, I had the bottle because, you know, a friend was so nice to leave it around. So if you are making your second cocktail and you have a bottle of tequila around, I would highly advise just giving the traditional Daisy Spec a try with tequila and seeing what the variations are. Instead of a sugar rim, I did put a little bit of salt. That was all I could find in your salt cellar. I guess it was a little, but I'll just do one of those. Ooh, yeah. So this is a way different cocktail than the Tommy's.
Sidecar.
Yeah, it's a way different cocktail than the Sidecar, but not that much. It's not barrel aged or barrel rested spirit, so it's going to taste way fresher. Obviously, tequila lime and sugar will instantly take you to, you know, or at least for me, it takes me to Mexico and, you know, a beach somewhere or a pool. It doesn't really matter what sugar rim you use, as long as the granules are small enough to actually fit on this, you know, like stick to the side of the glass. I was using some. These guys have some really large granulated salt on the rim of this glass, so you can barely see that it's barely sticking. So yeah, that's more what you're worried about. We were using castor sugar because it's really fine. It's really easy to. Thank you, John. Monkey 47.
I was wondering. I was like, is Monkey
I was
46 like
no,
a special release?
I'm
Is this
just
something
I'm just
I don't
talking.
know about?
I'm a good cognac cocktail in at this point.
There we go.
Yeah, so you just want to make sure it's a sugar that can stick to the rim. Oh, we didn't put the sound of music on the background. Jamie's sad. Come on.
Oh, he
Come on,
misses
Sean.
the music.
I know, right? Yeah, so that's kind of the Daisy. Daisy cocktails in general are a type of sour. They're still here in the modern era. We use them a lot. There's another variation on the Daisy, which is the equal parts daisy. Daisy cocktails in the modern like cocktail family is basically a sour that has both a base spirit, and a modifier, as well as some sort of citrus. So that's where you're getting the daisy spec. You can alter it a little bit if you like a drink that's a little bit more sugar, added. That's easy. You can obviously add bar spoons to, quarter ounces or even a half ounce of some sort of sugar. A lot of modern cocktails actually bump up citrus to a full ounce, and then that kind of changes the mouthfeel, and there's a little less booze. Or you can bring it up.
Margarita.
Yeah,
Generally.
totally. It totally changes things. So yeah, it obviously is easy to kind of build off of this, but this was the original daisy. This was the original daisy. This is the daisy that went down south across the border, and then you get into all kinds of great cocktails off of that family tree, whether it be Margarita or Tommy's Margarita or any of these other guys. It's a good stuff. You'll definitely see the daisy come back on this series for sure.
The daisy, yeah.
Can you talk about what you did in there?
Sure, yeah. This is the same spec. It's 3/4 of an ounce of lime juice, obviously. I always try to match the citrus with where the base spirit comes from. So lime, these things called lemons don't grow in Mexico. Limon is this, or it's a smaller one of these guys, the little guys that you see at the taco shop. They call them Persian limes. If you do see lemons, they're usually more like the Italian style with the really thick skin and very little flesh. So yeah, you're going to get limes as opposed to lemons in the Margarita. It's 3/4 ounce of lime, 3/4 ounce of Cointreau again, and then 1.5 ounces. We used our guest last week, Brandon, left a bottle of Dahlia, which is New Cristiano, which is basically a reposado tequila, a rested tequila, barrel rested tequila that is then filtered out the barrel color and all that.
Why is it so empty?
I don't know.
It's not empty
Somebody's
enough.
been. Well, it's a new product, so we've just been testing it here at the studio to see what's going on, putting it through its paces, as you know. Yeah, Demerara is a really cool sugar syrup because it gives you that kind of like smoky, molassesy quality. John, I do love using Demerara as well.
Especially in an old-fashioned. So fantastic. I think we introduced a couple of things that I just want to put a pin into and say there's going to be a lot more on this. So we do these weekly live streams, and we're going to be doing, I think this is 4 out of 52 or something like that. We're going to do this every week for a year.
What are we doing?
We did.
Why did we do that?
It's going to be fun.
Who thought of that idea?
We're loving it. We're really
we're having
enjoying
a good
it.
time.
But as some of these things come up, we're touching on things. We're touching on spirits categories. We're touching on cocktail families. We're touching on bartending techniques.
Yep.
And just so that you know, for those of you who are already members of the Cocktail Journey, if you're a member at our growth membership level, then we're going to be releasing as early as next month good, beautiful, on-demand content that's going to be a deep dive and a guided experience through this education. We're going to start with the essentials of bartending techniques. We'll end up doing a whole video on shaking and the different kinds of shaking, different shakers, also different shaking techniques, from like the shaking technique that was demonstrated today to what is rolling a cocktail and when do you roll a cocktail as opposed to shake a cocktail.
What is whip shaking?
What is whip shaking? What's dry shaking?
Isn't there just a shake? Yeah.
And so we're going to do a deep dive into bartending techniques. That's going to be a whole series that we're going to launch into this year. We're also going to be doing Spirits 101. And so we're going to start with diving deep into a spirits category and talking about everything from the distillation techniques to the different kinds of spirits. You want to talk about gin, we're going to talk about all sorts of gin in terms of, London Dry versus Plymouth versus Old Tom and the other kinds of like new American style gins and that sort of thing. And then we're going to be doing eventually cocktail families too. And so the daisy is like the very pinnacle, and I like to think of it like a tree, and there's all these branches that come off of it, whether the root structure or the
and that whole
trunk
concept,
and branch
as
structure.
John Schmidt says, like kind of originated with Gary Reagan.
Yep.
And it's evolved even and become more complex since then. I think that even back when he wrote that book, like a long time ago now, things have evolved even further from there. And even I don't even think him and some of those visionaries in the 80s could even contemplate like the amount of cocktails that have kind of resurgence, that have kind of become in this resurgence, but also like the variations on all those, right? Like they all started riffing off of the classics that they knew and that they made at their bars, but it's just exploded, right? And even more so. So I definitely think that The Joy of Mixology is a great book to kind of, invite you into this world of, realizing that there's only a handful of cocktails and that every cocktail you can think of falls under a little family. And they're all made very simply, maybe a little bit different from each other, but there's only a handful of ways of balancing a cocktail. And once you learn those, like the sky is the limit. Rebecca talks about, well, what about ginger? Like what kind of cocktail should I add a little ginger into? And John just answered the question with the Gin Mule. The Buck family is one that we absolutely should discover, which you guys mostly say is the Mule, right? But as every cocktail that started with vodka actually started with gin generally, because vodka didn't really show up into the American lexicon until after Prohibition, well into the 40s, almost the 50s. But you can even add a touch of ginger to this cocktail. If you have like a little Japanese ginger grater, right? You can just press a little ginger juice into your favorite cocktail and it'll add that ginger's bite and spice. So, but once you start to learn that there's only a handful of ways to balance a cocktail, which is really kind of concentrating on in learning the classics and understanding that those are the best ways to balance them, then you can just riff off of them, and obviously you can change it for your own palate. But that's really what I've always taught my bartenders. Is that you shouldn't ever try to cowboy a cocktail, which is the way I would call it. It's like you're cowboying a cocktail. Like, what cocktail are you trying to base this off of? And if you can't think of that, or you don't know what that is, then you're probably going the wrong direction. So if you like the idea of a spirit and a modifier in the same glass, then really get interested in the Daisy family and learn that there's so many more modifiers out there today than there was 100 years ago, that you can come up with your own Daisy cocktail,
Carissa, what exactly makes a margarita no longer a Daisy?
Yeah, so the Tommy's Margarita is not a Daisy.
So talk about Tommy's Margarita for a second.
Sure, the Tommy's Mexican restaurant is
Don't
from.
do too much spoiler alert for a margarita episode, but
Tommy's restaurant is in San Francisco, and they were the visionaries on putting fresh citrus into a margarita. For me and for all of us in the Bay Area, that was the seminal place that we all think of when we're like, the margarita. Like that's where you go drink them before all these other bars have sprouted up juicing fresh lime juice. You really do get a totally different experience because you knock out the orange liqueur. It's what we considered for a little while a skinny margarita, where it's just tequila, lime, and sugar. When you run out of this, make a Tommy's Margarita. Yeah, you don't need it. I mean, it's a totally different vibe, right? This one has a heavy orange element to it, so it's more citrusy. Whereas the Tommy's Margarita is just super fresh, like just sweet, sour, tequila, boom. There's like nothing else. It's kind of one-dimensional in a way, but they're super crushable. And that's why like every Tommy's Margarita I've ever put on a menu has triple outsold any other cocktail. It's just, as soon as you order one, you order three, because they're just down so fast. There's a heavy amount of citrus that you're just like, I'll take another, take another, take another, take another, take another. So if you want to slow somebody down on the margarita, you make them a Daisy, and then they have to like kind of choke on it a little bit more. It's drier and it's a little boozier.
Yeah, we have about 5 minutes left in this live stream. So any burning questions you want to ask before we're gone, let us know. No spoilers. There's plenty to explore.
We should definitely like just do a book on like best cocktail books and dive deep into that. Everybody's starting to pop up some of my favorite books. Obviously, I think the only one nobody's mentioned today is the two from Jeff from Meehan. Either the PDT that Jim wrote, and then his bar manual or whatever it's called.
Bartender's manual.
Yeah,
little green one.
Little is an understatement, but and if you've ever been around Jim and actually heard him talk about the way he approaches a book and how many books him and all of his friends back when they were working in the old bars in New York, now they would take all their tip money, go to like, actually not eBay because it didn't exist, but like go to estate sales and stuff and buy up old bar manuals just to try to learn and glean a new cocktail they haven't been able to imagine before. It's pretty rad. So the way he approaches writing books is really incredible. And then, I mean, Alex Day and the proprietors of Death and Company, they approach it in a completely different way. Alex is really scientific minded and like that scientific process. So when you read the Cocktail Codex or the Death and Company book, like it can read a little sciencey. But he takes a scientific method approach, and if you look at the way he approaches his cocktail families, they're going to be a little different than Gary Reagan. Is generally that more modern attempt at kind of categorizing. But he also he'll do the original cocktail and then he'll do something that's in the spirit of, but more modern, and that's really the approach that has made Death and Company and their bars so successful.
Great questions, such good resources. I like to remember and remind myself that there was a time when there was very, 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 very little, if no,
That's how I learned how to bartend.
education about cocktails. And I've heard Meehan speak about that, and he's just I had to say, I think it was he would spend a week's worth of his pay
Luckily
to buy this one edition, this first edition book that didn't exist anywhere else, so that he could glean the context and understand it. And now we can all benefit from the foundation that they've laid. And so it's pretty amazing.
Where the Sidecar
Great question,
name
John.
came from. There's the bullshit story of the sidecar from the bike or whatever that I think is kind of the one that everybody says. I don't really know. I don't think that we've really nailed that one down. And a lot of the things that we now think are absolutely finite, for sure, the way cocktails were invented or whatever. It's just that we've all decided to believe the stories, you know. There's a lot of things that I've just said on this weekly live stream that 10 years ago I'd be like, well, the story says, but now we're just it's been written in every book, in every YouTube cocktail guy who read the article on Wikipedia is yep, that's definitely what it is. So whatever, but it's in the spirit, right? Even with the French 75, well, that came from the gun or whatever that they were shooting in World War I. It's cool,
Okay.
But the cocktail names are kind of all bullshit anyways, that's my least favorite part about writing a cocktail menu is having to think of cocktail names. So after a while, you either have to get really punny or funny, or you have to just do a concept menu where it's every cocktail is named after a different color, It's the only way to get around having to come up with ridiculous cocktail names.
Some of them have some good stories. We'll get into those. I think more of the modern favorites and the modern variations that have become popularized, we can sort of trace back those origin stories and have something definitive. But I don't know. Sidecar.
Yeah. Sasha's book is great. And if you've ever been to any of the bars that he consulted on, and those are the bars that make classic cocktails the best, even to this day, in my opinion. Bars the Varnish in LA, they approach traditional cocktails in the most classic Sasha Petrowski sense, and it's just it's mind blowing that a bar. I feel like I made a great martini when I was running bars, and I feel like everybody who worked under me kind of understood how I made my martini. But then you go to one of Sasha's bars and they're stirring it 8 times longer, and everything's frozen cold, and they're using the right ice, and they just approach it in the right way for sure.
Well, that's a wrap for tonight.
Thanks for coming.
Come next
I like how we
week.
just had the margarita on the whole time.
Lovely.
Always, that's the problem with the sidecars. Everything always turns up margarita.
It does. We love the sidecar. It's really good. We're doing the Martinez next week, I believe.
Ooh, the Martinez. Named after Martinez, California. I lived there for a couple years, and there's a little plaque that says. I'll tell that story next week.
So tell the story next week. If you are not on the email list for the cocktail journey, we send these recipes out the Saturday in advance, so you can make sure you stock your bar and you're all prepped for this. So you can go sign up at launch.thecocktailjourney.com. Just scroll all the way to the bottom, put your email address in, and you'll get the email that'll come out on Saturday about the Martinez. And then we can also chat about some of the other stuff that's coming out. Good, fun updates for members this month, so look for that in the next week or two about the new education series that we're launching, the video series, and some of the other experts we're bringing on. So thank you for joining us. You were lovely. It was so fun to see you, and we will see you next week.
Love you guys. Thanks
Cheers.
Thanks for coming.
All right. Woohoo, party time!